So good morning, everybody. I'm Franklin Escobedo. I'm the Community Services Director for the Larkspur Library. We're here today with Gary Bartl. We'll start in a moment as more people come into the room. We are recording today's event. So for some reason you fall off the internet or you get disconnected, we will be posting this later on today to the library's YouTube channel. Again, I'm Franklin Escobedo. I'm the Community Services Director for the Larkspur Library and Larkspur Recreation. So thank you for joining us this morning. Hopefully we have a full house today. We had a lot of people sign up for this workshop. Gary's been coming to us, at least I know he was with us last year in the library in person, and hopefully next year we'll be live in person again in the library again. So we just got to make it through so everybody gets vaccinated. But we are glad that you joined us on this day. I know it rained last night, so everything is fresh and wet this morning, but and it's a beautiful day here in Marin. So again, welcome and thank you for joining us. Today's event was made possible by the Friends of the Library who helped us get the Zoom that we had to do our workshops on. This is also in partnership with the UC Marin Master Gardeners, and the Commons Foundation has also helped us get this all set up. So welcome and thank you for joining us. And again, today also, if you have questions, make sure that you use the Q&A. That makes it easier for me to relay the questions to Gary. He's also going to be jumping back and forth between his PowerPoint and showing stuff because he's joining us today from his actual succulent workshop. So we're really excited to be here. And are you ready, Gary?
Sure. All right, buddy. Let's go now.
So if you're ready, Gary, I'm going to hand this over to you and we'll get started. So thank you, everybody.
The Larkspur Library and the Master Gardeners, welcome today to a lecture about succulents. So it's going to be a little different in that I don't have people here or an audience to talk to, but I'm going to do my best. And it's new with technology. We'll try to get the buttons pushed right. And so let's begin. You people probably came today to learn more about succulents. And luckily, I've made all the mistakes for so many years that I can teach you how to try to keep them alive really well. Oops. Okay, so what types of succulents are there? Well, they're mainly a leaf storing or a stem storing or a root storing organ for water retention. So your leaf will be something like a big aloe with its juicy leaf, or the other one there is a Senatio. So those are both leaf succulent storers. There are also stem storers. So we have the cacti, and we have the small bunched one is a Euphorbia, and then the tall one on the other side with the long leaves, that's from Madagascar, that's a Pachypodium. And then the roots are called caudiciform succulents. And you could have a water storage organ in a root. So can we stop share now? Let me show you an example of that. So this is an example of a root store, and that's where it'll keep its water. Okay.
It may take a second.
Okay, I guess computer's reloading here.
We could just restart it here.
All right, hopefully we'll get smoother with that transition here. All right, I think we want one or two too far. Okay, so leaf succulents and then the stem storage and the root storage. So special adaptions are also the shape of the leaf, and the succulents go dormant during a period where they rest, either due to heat or cold. And then protective chemicals are actually made by the plants, which act as sunscreen in the summertime and an antifreeze in the wintertime. And indeed, a whole new type of metabolism with making photosynthesis in a really strange way. So here is where shape matters. If you have a big pile of snow, it's going to take a long time to melt. But if you spread it out, it's going to melt quickly. Same way why a big polar bear is round. So these are all ways to minimize water loss in their desert environments. Again, a few large leaves. And the one in the middle is the two leaves split, and two new leaves come up in between, and they suck all the water out and just leave a filmy little paper at the end of the process, as water is so precious, they have to recycle it that well. Now, this is an Aeonium that's in dormancy. So you can see that the leaves are curled up and it's protecting that inner bud, so it's gone to sleep. So you really don't want to water plants heavily when they're in dormancy. They have to rest. And unfortunately, some want to rest in our winter climate here, so it's going to be tough when we have wet winters. And so the physiology, they can make waxy coatings, and they have what's called Chrysula acid metabolism, where their stomata, the leaf openings, are usually open for plants, all day long, and it's no problem. Well, there they would lose so much water out to the environment that they actually close their stomata all day, like hold their breath all day. So very strange, unique to them. And then you have protective pigments and window plants. So here are some examples of protective pigments. The one Haworthia that's red is from a winter blush, where the small sedum leaves, you can see at the top they're reddish, and the ones underneath are greenish that don't get the same amount of sun. So that's for sunscreen protection. And then window plants, so they can let light all the way down, and the tips of the plant could be at a soil level, but they'll let light in to do photosynthesis underground while they hide from predators. Here's an example of the windows letting light in and doing photosynthesis way at the back. Here are some of the window tips on this Haworthia cooperi. So we're going to talk about most everything today, but next topic will be propagation. So we can do that by seeds, by cuttings, and in some cases, even by leaves. So every flower blooms and hopefully gets pollinated and makes baby seedlings. So this is an Aeonium in bloom. And here we have the results of the seedlings. So on the, you can see the purple Senatio Chrysismis in the background of and then the little baby seedlings there in front. Well, now in the next picture, they've grown up and they've gone dormant. You can see how their buds are closing up. Now notice how the largest ones are green, and the ones that have the color are less vigorous in some way. They haven't grown as much. Well, that's due to bringing those colors along. You sometimes bring less advantageous genes along as well. So they can, the most vital ones are probably the ones with the most robust genes. And look how the Chrysismis is dwarfed now from where it was before. It's grown much slower. Now, some succulents bloom only one time in their lives, and that's called being monocarpic, for one flower. And if you see your agave start to swirl like that, you know what's coming next is a big flower stalk, often several feet or even yards high into the sky. It takes a long time for the swirl of the flowers to go, and every day you have the bees buzzing, and you can even see the rotation of the sunlight sometimes. And as you go further up, you can see the flowers have been pollinated, and then they dry up, fall off as seeds, and the plant dies because it comes from the actual central growing point of the plant, not out on the side like most flowers emerge. Here are the agave seedlings then from that very plant. I was weeding and I was going to reach down and get these little grass seedlings, and I noticed how unusually fat they were. And luckily I put 2 and 2 together, and we still have some of these original plants. So just one is growing in its original place, however. So it's only 6 or 7 inches wide, and it's been 6 or 8 years at least since that bloomed. Now here you can see a Haworthia that I purchased, and I saw it had like 2 or 3 big rosettes, and one looked a little, burned or whatever, damaged, but I thought, there's a lot of puppies in there, a lot of babies. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, it's just a bunch, but look at this single one here. Now it's right here. And look at how many little babies there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So all those want to grow. You could plant, just cut this off here, plant that up, and you'd have a whole patch of them. Here's a Monodenium in the Euphorbia family. And you can see these were more actually cut off. And the one even has a little tiny root at the bottom. If you can see that, that's called an adventitious root. So the plant is actually telling you, cut me here, please, cut me here. I can be on my own now. Now Euphorbias generally like to have larger cuttings. And so this one might not be make it because they're not as easy to propagate as other genuses. Or genera, actually, sorry. Now here is how they show you they want to live. This is an Aeonium that was abandoned on the side of a fence in very dark quarters. So first of all, it started rooting into the wood and turned its growing point up to try to go to the sunlight. Then metal thrown on top of it, it's rooting right in the wood. So they want to propagate for you. So it's really pretty easy once you get the hang of it. What you really need to do is once you make a cutting, you need to let it heal and scar off before planting it. So you don't put it right in water like you normally would with plants to get them the root. You actually let it air dry and then plant it a couple days later or a week, maybe even if it's a big one. Here's a picture of adventitious roots. So that shoot can just be broken off right there and everything should be good to go. Now some plants, this is an Aloe Plicatillus, has only one real method of cutting, of propagation, is to actually cut off a large stem. Otherwise by seed, it takes so many years to get a larger plant. Here is an example of leaf propagation. And you can see how I'm putting all the leaves there into the potting mixture. And we're good to go. They should root up and then you pot them up to the next largest size. One of the most important things about succulents is getting the soil right. So this is absolutely imperative to give them a chance to live here in our very clay soils that we have. So 3 main components, sand, silt, and clay, make up the soil. Sand, you can actually get one little particle in your finger, right? But silt and clay are microscopic. The clay is needed because it holds all the ions, the ammonias, the nitrogens, all these different chemicals are held into the clay, not into the sand. The sand gives you the drainage factor. So the soil amendments that you must add for successful, at least I feel that way, is lava, sand, or rock, or pumice, which is kind of the same thing, I would think, and perlite. Perlite is an artificial mineral. It's actually heated up in high pressure, and it pops like popcorn up. So it's very light and it's white. So, but being lightweight, it can wiggle its way up, and suddenly you have a white background. So lava sand is available locally at American Soil. It's now just A&S Landscape Materials in San Rafael. And pumice can be bought at some tack and feed stores under the name of Dry Stall. And you get a large probably bag, and it's much cheaper than buying specialty soil in small sizes from the nurseries. So let's move on to watering and irrigation. You can see those leaves are drying up just like a sponge. So that plant is asking for water, please. And in fact, it looks like that one leaf is going to be, they're going to get all the water out of it soon. And then they shed those leaves. And they continue that process either until they get enough water to thrive again, or the last leaf standing finally gives out. So how often do you water? Well, is it a container? Is it in bright sunlight on the porch? So generally once a week is kind of a good average to start with, and then you can adjust it up and down from there. Some places, gardens could use it maybe every 5 days. In other places, I've gone 2, 3, 4 weeks even between waterings. Your plants won't look quite as well if you deprive them of that much water, but actually some will give you quite a color blush. But so there's that fine line, and some, in fact, you would actually rot out if you water too much. So that's one of the main things is watering correctly. So you don't, because they come from a desert, you don't want to water them every time it rains in the Sahara. No, they still need regular water. No plants are growing in the sand dunes in the Sahara. So and then the other one is the people that can't help quite but keep watering and watering a little bit, and eventually loving it to death that way. So it's much better. Remember, you can always water tomorrow, but you can never unwater. So integrated pest management is a way to try to keep plants healthy. So first off, you don't plant a succulent in a boggy place, and you don't plant a bog plant into a dry garden. So the right plant for the right place. Birch trees look great, but it's not the best choice really for our climate, but everybody can plant their own. Also knowledge of the plant and the kind of pests. So you can get a rootstock or a plant that might not be as sensitive to those problems. Please go out and enjoy your garden and watch it, and then you can catch problems earlier, and they're much easier to solve than coming into a giant infestation. Sometimes the problem is just the cultural conditions. Maybe the plant is getting extra water from the neighbor's runoff on their irrigation, is shooting over or something. So move that plant and put a water-loving plant there, and that would solve perhaps that problem. So if you do want to treat, we try to pick the least harmful method, mechanical or organic methods, and to monitor it then and retreat as necessary. So the least toxic method is usually best for all of wildlife. Pests, those nasty pests. So rubbing alcohol and water 50-50 in your spray bottle is number one thing you can do. It takes care of aphids and mealies and most everything really quickly. So again, 50% isopropyl, is it rubbing alcohol at the stores, usually 70 or 90%, and mix it half and half with water. So here we can see aphids attacking the flower stalks, which they love to do. Mealies usually go more in the leaf crevices and even into the roots. Aphids overwhelm you in sheer numbers. Mealybugs hide from predators. They make a cottony, like cocoon, you know, kind of like out of spider's silk or something. It looks like a little bits of Q-tips. How did this get stuck in here? And so the scale next are kind of armored, and they are difficult to deal with, but they're usually in smaller numbers. But if it's a bad infestation, it's usually just best to throw out the plant. Now, mammals are one of the worst damages, of course, of pests. And birds sometimes pick at them. Now, slugs and snails are not a very good thing. And so Sluggo is a great product. Now, when I mention a product or a nursery or a book, it's just been helpful to me. We're not endorsing anything coming from the University of California. So they've just things I've found helpful, but please don't take them as an endorsement. Oh, right. So slugs and snails, Sluggo is organic, safe around pets and kids, and it breaks down into fertilizer. Frost is something that's hard to protect against if you want to put out your frost cloths or something, but I generally just let them go, live or die. And then fungus, of course, is a problem, especially in wet winters. Or if you haven't amended your soil with lava sand or pumice, that's where you really get them. And it helps also to pot up the plant or plant it a little bit raised from the surrounding surface area so that the water drains away from its roots and you don't get crown rot and other fungus problems. Now here you can see the mealybugs, the white cottony things attacking the Aloe Plicatillus leaf there, and spray, spray, spray. In the middle, it looks a continuing infestation that looks like possibly an Echeveria. And then the purple one, the Graptopetalum there, Fred Ives, that one is past damage. So you can't do anything about that one. New growth will come, hopefully, and no more bugs, and it could resume a nice shape, or you can do what you want with it. Well, this is the Senatio Chrysismis Frigidus. Oh no, so frost has killed it. If you remember that cute little purple plant. This one just couldn't make it. And so then the fungus comes in and the frost. So it's either or. You'll see this damage mostly in December and January, and it starts to taper off in February. If you do get some damage early and say just the top portion of the plant freezes, it's best to not cut it off right away for a couple reasons. One is the frost may come again, so it'll just freeze the same dead part, where if you had cut it off, it would freeze the next portion of the plant. So you actually protect something from coming later if you leave that on. Plus, the plant will actually, what's called compartmentalize. It'll actually decide where the damage is to, and it'll kind of die off right there and show you where to actually cut it in March when it's warmer and better to do that. So you can see fungus. So if you see your fungus into the crown growing point, as you see here, it's hopeless. Just discard the plant. Often it just will fall apart when you pick it up anyways. Now, say it's just a leaf here or a leaf here. Well, sure, by then, at that point, you can still just cut out those portions that are black and make sure, you dig it out, all that stuff, a little knife, whatever, and your plant has a good chance of surviving. Now on this side, we can see the fungus coming, and then we even have another fungus coming up. So this one's probably feeding on live tissue, and this one is actually feeding on the dead tissue. So we'll talk a little bit about design, and then afterwards, I guess we'll turn on the camera and I'll go through and actually show you different things, the seeds and the top dressings and different plants. But for now, we'll talk to you about design. So this is a garden. I've kind of use this method frequently in a small garden. I'll use vertical flagstone in the back to kind of simulate a little mountain range. Plus it gives you the elevation gain, so you can have little dips and falls and things in your gardens. One of the most important things for me with doing containers is applying a top dressing on top of the container. And I can take my little kit here with me to the nursery and pick out just the right match for it right there. And then it gives you a third element. You have the nice pot, the nice plant, but then instead of just looking at bare soil, you can look at, again, a coordinated piece of the design to make the plant really stand out. Here's the same container side by side. Of course, the after picture has to be so much better, just like in all those commercials for services. So what do you think? Do you like the one with the top dressing? But they're pretty nice either way, but I think it adds a certain pizzazz or snap to it. Here's a garden I'll show you 4 pictures of as it grows over time. So the client here wanted the garden to appear pretty full right away. So the spacing of the plants and can become a problem later on. So each picture is probably maybe 8-9 months or up to a year in succession. And then the last one is the redo here. But so you can see how it's really grown up in quite a few places. And then it really pops here. So everything is just grown. And that is then the remake. So I'll run through them again for you quick. The original plants. So it's this one in particular goes crazy. This one takes the third one to go grow large. But so this is how vibrant they can be in our environment here. Wow, that got lush, huh? You could also nick your knees if you're not careful walking down the aisle. And there again is the redo. All right, here is a one of the few gardens you can actually drive by and see and walk by. It's in Mill Valley by Boyle Park, and it's on Sydney as you drive out of the park. So we start with the big pile, so you can see the soil and then the red lava sand that is mixed in with it and provides the drainage material that you need for successful planting. And there's the finished product. Now today you couldn't believe this aloe here is already up to here. There's one back here that's up to here now. Those are Aloe Hercules. And this agave bloomed with a giant stalk, was the talk of the neighborhood for a while, as it took several months to flower, and then has been replaced by Aloe Bainesii. Here's a little nook by the sliding or the French doors there. And then look in the backyard, as you can see the Aloe Plicatillus and the Ponytail Palm there, mostly in the background. And this Aeonium grew up real well too there. Don't mind him, but don't let him into your yard for sure. There's a close-up detail of that garden. Now, I learned to which plants grow much larger and which stay small, so I can use the proper ones in their proper environment. Again, that's like integrated pest management, just putting the right plant in here. I wouldn't want to put one that grows so large that it takes over. And these could get lost though in a yard-sized garden, but in here they match well. Again, I use the rock and elevation changes to give a more natural look to it. And there's a view in sunshine from the other side. This peperomia is particularly an interesting plant. Here it is a bit later, and you can see this has grown up already, and the falcatas are in full bloom. And this agave grew up and actually broke the container open, so it had to be redone and fortified. And I believe it might be starting to get a swirl and may possibly be blooming over the next year. Oh, some pretty plants. And there's a more close-up view. So it's going to be time soon where I would need to propagate or clean up here. So you can see this one could be cut way back here, and this one probably taken off. And then up here, it's getting a little crowded out for that aloe, so we might take some of those off and then let them regrow. And here, these interesting, one of the few cacti that I use. And here you see the little buds, and those can be propagated or just left there to look very interesting. There's a Haworthia. Yay, I just love those little plants. And I think that might be it. No, a couple more. So we have the crown of thorns there blooming, Euphorbia mealy, and this is a dwarf agave, so it's not going to grow huge like the other ones. And here is a neat Falkirk tigrina, tiger jaws. This is a Euphorbia here, where this caudex grows into the size of maybe a pineapple or volleyball and can wind up with hundreds of leaves. And then it could shed them in the dry season, just like our leaves shed their trees in the cold. So one thing I really love to do is to pack in unexpected little surprise plants in the crevices, because that's how they kind of grow in nature, right? They're not going to grow on top of the rock. So they find their nooks and crannies and surprise the casual person when they look closer at the garden and see the living detail that look just like rocks. These are lithops, so they're called living stones. And we'll hopefully look at some closer up here soon. All right, that was the last one. So why don't we turn the camera on, and I'll show you the little workshop here, and we'll do some demonstrations. So I go to stop share, I think, right?
You're good, Gary. You're good. So we can see you now.
Oh, okay. But I can't see me on the big screen, but I guess that doesn't matter.
We can see you.
Okay, well then let's go on. So here, let me show you quick. I have my plants and my top dressings and some pots, and I got the soil right here and lava rock and lava sand. So they're all at my disposal here. So let's get a few plants. Let's do propagation first, I guess. So here we have an actual stem that was broken off, and whether it was ball or dog damage or something. So this can now, it's hardened off because it happened a few days ago. So I could be able to plant this about there and wait a while. Now this is a slow rooting one. This is an Othona species, so it's not going to be as robust. It's going to be a little bit more of a challenge, but life's worth a challenge, isn't it? So leaf propagation. So if you can see here, this little baby plant is coming off of this one little leaf. It's already got its baby roots. There's another one. So here we have two leaves. This is getting stuck to my Band-Aid. Now you can see the color isn't very good on this one, and it's getting kind of ishy squishy kind of thing. So that's going to rot out and turn a brown black goo soon. Where hopefully this one will be able to develop roots and become a new plant. Now the family that does this easily is the Chrysula family. Let me show you that quick. So this is one of the biggest families around, with Chrysula, the Kalanchoes, the Cotyledons, Etreverias, the Sedums, and the Sempervivums, which also include the Aeoniums. So those are a bunch of the genuses, and those genuses usually grow well and can be outside here a lot if they have the proper soil. Now, this plant, the silver dollar plant, I have not been able to get these to root with any consistency. So, and this one you could already see is already kind of turning yellow, and neither produced roots. So that's probably ease of propagation is, and the difficulty is why some plants might cost a lot more than others, or slow growing nature. So that's can account for some of those differences. Now here you can see an Echeveria that has its roots already there for us. You see all those pink little roots? So notice that they're mostly growing up here. So you can recut this plant, or right here. I think that would be the thing to do, because this is probably just going to rot out under there, where this is more active and growing. So you would just take your clippers, make a fresh cut. And now, because I have an open wound there, I must let that heal, at least, you know, the larger the plant, the longer to heal. As now, when you take a Aloe Plicatillus cutting, you can see that this would need at least a good week or two. But here are baby roots coming out. So here's one up here too, an adventitious root. So I could plant that anywhere through here into the soil, and the plant will look a lot better after it's grown up some. So here is a Gladiophyllum. It's in the Lithops family, and here are its seed pods. So you can plant these and have them grow well. I'll probably send them off to Succulent Gardens, because they are awesome at doing this, and then share the plant, and they can grow it up and provide it all to you too. So where do you get plants quickly? Well, even the big box stores have them. It seems like most places, Targets or Rite Aids or whatever, but there are a few specialty places. So Lone Pine Gardens is up in Sonoma County on the way to Sebastopol, and Succulent Gardens is down on the way to Monterey. There's a giant power plant down there. Anyways, it's on the Castroville, I think it is. So they have 3 or 4 wonderful acres of succulents there. There's a couple places in the East Bay. The Dry Garden is very good, and the East Bay Garden. So where else? Well, lots of places. Oops, I don't do that anymore. Okay, what's next? Here we can see the smallest little Echeveria. It really gets kind of a caudex root again as a water storing organ. And this one we can see is kind of not going to do so well. And it's time to repot that one. So again, this one would be good to make a fresh cut and let that heal off. And often the stump could grow some small little rosettes, but they're usually not very interesting or healthy. All right, again. So this little Aeonium here is kind of a cute little thing, and it's much smaller, good for a little tabletop thing or something. And I can just take my clippers. Now, this one I could plant it here right now because this is already hardened off. But if I wanted to plant it deeper, then I would need to let that one harden off. And this one, of course, just let that sit there for a day or two even, and it's good to go. So here's a plant that was recently given to me. Now look at how, if the leaf comes off just that easy, you know it's able to grow leaves. Now some of the fancy echeverias, or even some of the regular ones too, sorry, will have a very wide place of attachment. You can see how narrow these are. So the narrower they are, the more readily they are to come off and to grow. Now this has the store soil in it. So let's talk about the soil quick. Now notice it's gotten a little dry. They use a lot of peat moss, and there is the perlite. So when you try to water this, most of the water could go right around the edge and out around, and you'd think you watered it, but it really not if the peat moss has become dehydrated like this. Now, in my plants, you can pull them up and they're not going to be coming off. So you can just hold it and they're solid in there. Isn't that a cool one? Euphorbia obesa. Now here are some Echeveria Velvet Queen. That was the first picture there. So let's talk about this one quick. Now you notice how this looks so much more purple. So this one is in stress out there. While it was cold, it had to make and it's getting no water, so it's desperately trying to protect itself and limit its resources. So if a plant looks too colorful, you maybe want to investigate and see if it isn't just in distress. But as we can see, this one has kind of grown up, but still it's going to stay in this soil, and so you're not going to be watering the outside. So in this case, just clean it up a little bit, probably make a cut. Or I could plant it in the ground and even just put rocks around here to hold it up. And then here we hit the jackpot on propagation right here. So we can see there's going to be many babies to get from that one. Now here is a Euphorbia that I just noticed the other day has died back. So the root it seems to be okay. So I'd have to cut this here, and then up here I would want to cut it and make sure that all the tissue is alive, and hopefully then I can root the top plant and at least save something for myself. Now, I mentioned that plants have a dormancy and a growing period. Well, here are two examples. Dicotyledon, right? Tylecodon is, these are winter growers. So suddenly in October, boom, the little leaf buds will pop open and I know it's time to start watering these. And generally about April, the leaves start to turn yellow and they'll fall off and they want to be dormant and kept fairly dry over the winter. So that would make these kind of a hard choice for outdoors here, but in container gardens, they're very interesting. So here, here's a peperomia, and it's known for an interesting leaf with a little stripe that allows the light to come in. So plants like these can be good to use as trees in small little container gardens. Let's see. Should we open it up for questions now? How are we doing on time? Oh, here is a quick.
No, we're still good on time, Gary. So
Okay, here is some Aloe Hercules that wasn't thriving. So I've taken it apart, and so now it's healed over. It's been probably 4 or 5 days, and they are good to plant now. And hopefully they'll grow up large until their full potential now. So yeah, the propagation is really quite easy with these. So let me show you a couple book and resources if people kind of like that thing. So this is out of print book, the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Cacti, but it has the plant families in there like no other book does. It's written by a famous English author, Gordon Rowley. For a more contemporary view, this is a book in print, I think 2016 or so, believed by a gentleman in the East Bay, and it's the Timber Press Guide to Succulent Plants of the World, and it really covers the whole range, not in as much detail as other books, of course, that are just on the topic, such as a book, on lithops. Now these are some of the habitat photos of where these plants grow. And there's kind of a close-up. So they're very interesting, and supposedly aren't even supposed to grow in our area here because they're too sensitive. But I was never one to not experiment. And so sure enough, they seem to grow fine a lot of times. Let's see over here. There's a production of the Euphorbia journal by a local doctor who is famous in the area and is no longer with us, unfortunately. Here is a diagram. Here's North America and Africa and Asia. You can see the range of succulents go up above the Arctic Circle, and a big concentration here, though. And here is the distribution of Euphorbia and the cactus in North America. So an example of kind of convergent evolution where they become columnar water stores. And I discovered Penjing, a ancient landscape garden art in China that developed maybe between 700 and 900 AD. And they have a land and water Penjing. So I was really struck by this form. Now here is the single specimen form, which gets shipped to Japan in about 1200 AD and becomes a bonsai. So you can see where one might be a beautiful bonsai specimen, but with the other ones, it makes it for a whole more realistic forest look. And finally, they have a landscape pinging. And so that blew me away, that they actually manipulate your rock to make whatever you want your containers to be. So I could make cliffs, you know, I was freed. They used saws and used cement to put it together. Well, I'm not going to wait that long. Let me just use my 5-minute epoxy and we'll put these rocks together. And so that kind of really allowed me to experiment and really grow my designs. So what else should we do? Some of the containers, if you get some of these specialty little containers, they work wonders for succulents. They're often sold at pottery shows or at succulent shows, which kind of aren't happening now, which is why we're on Zoom. You can also just use bonsai pots, and they make good succulent containers, as they aren't too deep to allow all that extra water with the moisture. Whew, so here's a couple of the lithops that I had mentioned. So they're very interesting little plants, and they, if conditions are right, they're going to give you a nice little flower there. All right, well, so here is a little Dorstinia. So this is a strange little genus from a long time ago. And still, even this little plant I can hold up. So we know it's well rooted. And then that would be about a $10 plant, where Granddaddy here would be more like a $100 plant. These are very slow, slow growing plants. Cactus and Euphorbia are very similar in being stem succulents, but the cactus leaves have changed into needles over time. Well, the spiky parts of Euphorbias may be there that look like that, but they maintain little baby leaves often, which tell you that, and they have a white sappy latex. So there is a little, just a little white there where you damage. So be very careful, as that is quite treacherous and dangerous. So don't especially get it in your eyes. Now, here is a little cute mesem, and I noticed there was a little tiny mealybug in there. So that little bit of cottony thing in there is what we don't want. If you catch it early by observing, give it a spray, and it works wonders. Now they can also infiltrate the roots though. So pull it up and check. And if you see a bunch of white spots and white matting all in there, yeah, clean it up. You can soak it a little bit in the dilute solution and then let it dry out, and you can pot it up, and hopefully the infestation will be gone. Now, sometimes we try to propagate and it just doesn't happen, right? So in this case, the plant root didn't take, so I can cut it up here again and try again. But you know, it's 5 other siblings came through, so that should grow into a nice little collection there. All right, I think that's pretty much what I have here. So yeah, should we have questions or
Yeah,
any?
so let me start with a question for the audience. I keep forgetting to do this, guys. So we want to know who's a master gardener in the audience. So I'm going to launch a poll real quick. So if you're a master gardener, click yes, and if you're not, just hit no. I keep forgetting to take count every time we have garden talks. So
Oh, I can't vote. Okay.
yeah, no, you can't vote, but I know you're a master gardener. I think we got most of everybody. There's 4 more people need to vote. And if you're not, just click no. Okay, so we'll start with the first question, Gary, is to keep succulents from getting too tall and leggy, does it help to decrease the amount of water that they are given?
No, thank you so much for asking me that. I have it right here. So here we have a plant called Sedum nospomeranian. So we can see here, oops, now see how leggy it is? That shouldn't be, it's way over top. And the difference between all the nodes, right? Now here is one I just got from Lester's garden this morning, my friend nearby. Look how tight these nodes are in comparison and the color difference. So that makes all the difference. This was grown in low light. So look at how far the leaves are as it searches. So it's not a water at all. It's amount of light that leads to this crawling in here. It's making protective chemicals where here it can be so lazy, it barely gives us any nice color. So does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Good.
So the next one, someone was curious about your dog's name that you showed us.
Ash, yes, he's a large, it's not a German Shepherd there, but essentially it is. It's just more like Belgium, and Beauceron is what they're called. So he's 100 pounds of puppy pleasure.
So particularly good overall succulent book for ID and care. Do you have a favorite?
For the last part?
For it's a succulent book for ID and care.
Yes, the ID one, there's an illustrated succulent book. It's inside, so I won't run and get it, but it's a picture book by Alphabet, and it's quite a useful resource. And basically, most books will give you sections on the care or propagation, and then the specialty books by genus are really going to give you a lot more information.
Okay. Does all sand provide drainage? The smaller it is, the less it drains.
No, so that is key. You can't use regular sand, even from the beach, and you rinse out the salt water or wherever. No, the big part about the lava sand is all the kind of different size pieces that are really in there, from really powder so that's really what makes the difference. Are those few products, the pumice and lava sands. Yeah, so you can't use regular sand or river sand or all the varieties.
Okay, so where might you find clay to create a good potting soil?
Clay, well, clay would only be one component, but your big, Shamrock would sell things, but I think that's better for more building materials. American soil has a lot of those places. The right ingredients, and so yeah, where to get the sand?
Yeah, I just where to find it. But you're saying it's just most
American soil. It's now ANS Landscape Materials. It's in San Rafael as you head towards the dump. It's the last business up above there, where the peacocks are. So it's and then I think you can probably get it now over the internet, or you can get pumice at tack and feed stores if you're further out, driving in the country or horse country. They probably would have that product.
Okay. So do you have a suggestion to deter deer from eating succulents?
Yes, 2 double high 8-foot fences. It's amazing that some people have problems with the deer, and I think in neighborhoods where there's enough lush material from the neighbors, roses and azaleas, they leave it alone. But tougher times, they seem to actually, some kind of African antelope and things actually graze on euphorbias with the poison latex juice. So I guess, hunger drives drives appetites. So some people try to use the motion machines, you know, spray the hose or make the loud sounds, or the predator urine stuff. Maybe try spinier species that might help deter them. Yeah, if I just don't have a problem with them, and I'm right by China Camp State Park, and so I just never really developed any good way. But try some of those. Those are products on the market, yeah, or ideas out there.
Okay. When you spray with alcohol water mixture, should you leave the succulents in shade afterwards?
No, they just return them to their same place. And remember, if you have one in a container and you pick it up and you turn it around the other way, you're actually opening up the plant for sunburn. So I didn't actually mention that, but if you bring a pot home from the nursery and it's been in shade and you suddenly put it out in bright sunlight, it's going to get sunburn and could die, or but certainly become disfigured. So just like the smart person who goes to Hawaii, they don't sit out for 8 hours the first day. They go for 1 hour and then they go do something else, go for 2 hours the next day, and they build up a base and then can be out in that sun for the whole day. And so the alcohol evaporates and the water is just like any kind of, you know, thunderstorm in the afternoon. It just dries up and doesn't damage the leaves at all. So yeah, it just evaporates the alcohol and doesn't, you know, so if a ladybug comes to eat other aphids that you didn't get, you know, there's no residual harm to them.
Okay. And if we get several days of rain, should we try to cover the succulents to avoid excessive watering?
Yeah, you know, if it's move it to, you know, if it's a container, can you move it, or do you want to? It's going to get pounded like that. Sure, if you have some specimens you really like and have the time, by all means, it would benefit them. Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell if
using the soil and planting higher and using, you know, a lot of the lava sand would really help to prevent the rot too.
Okay. And then can you tell if a succulent is dry by the leaves only or soil? If I use a top dressing, I cannot see the soil is dry or not. So
yeah, but you just stick your finger in, or a moisture meter. You can you know, watch the leaves. So you put a chopstick in or something and see if it's dry down there. The top dressing is just a thin layer on the top, so you brush it aside and feel the soil. You should, didn't then just put the top dressing back. I don't think you'd have a real problem.
okay. What recommendations do you have for fostering birds and insects in your succulents?
Aloes, so the aloe family, aloes and the haworthias and the gasterias feed the hummingbirds incredibly well, and especially a lot bloom in the winter when other things aren't blooming. And haworthias send out these cute little lilies. They're all in the lily family, so it'll send off this little shoot and a bunch of tiny little lilies, and the hummingbirds will actually fit in those things. And then, of course, the aloes, their inflorescence might have, you know, 50 or 100 blossoms, and, you know, might have several of those. So it provides a lot of food. Echeverias, hummingbirds eat echeverias. I mean, enjoy their nectar. So I don't, the messems, more the little flies and things. So yeah, but those are the big ones for the hummingbirds.
Okay, and then I have an aloe plant and it's growing so big that they start to turn left or right instead of growing up. How do I make them grow up?
Well, if it's Aloe Plicatillus or something like that, it's just the floppy nature of it. So you could stake it, would be pretty much the only way, or make cuttings and try to get it the trunk thicker in time to stay up. But if it's that one species, it's meant to flop. We get you a nice tree aloe here. Oh, anyways, where did I put that? Yeah, sorry, I didn't have my name tag today, but there, if you want to contact me at all, there's my info. You can text me or email me here, and I've always, yeah, the first time I haven't had my badge, I couldn't find it this morning. So sorry about that.
And we'll send that information out in our follow-up email with the survey
Oh.
and the recording link, so they can get that information too, Gary. So thanks for sharing that as well too.
Yeah.
So the next question is, how big does a dwarf agave get, and how do they bloom?
Oh, one of those little, yeah. So that one in the picture is about max size. So 6, maybe 8 inches would be a large one. And then they would make the babies around often. And those again, stay real small, under, 6 inches. Unfortunately, they bloom from the growing tip, just like Aeoniums and Sempervivums. So that main cluster, a rosette that blooms will die back and just be gone. So if it's a single rosette, the plant is dead if you haven't made pups. So.
Okay. And then how do you know which succulent can be propagated by stem cuttings?
Almost all of them can. Now, there's a few that can't. So one is that Pachypodium, Lamari in that one picture. I can run and get one. But anyways, it was tall with the spikes and had the leaves at the top. Looks like a little palm tree. So that one is notoriously difficult. Aloe Ramimosima, something like that, Ramimissima, is almost impossible to propagate by cuttings. It can be done, I guess, but I've tried. It's very, very hard. And so small plants can be, worth 3 times, 4 times what other similar ones are, because of the slow growing nature and its difficulty in making cuttings. Again, when you're in the Euphorbia family, you want to make sure the cutting is larger. In this case here with this little Aeonium, I could cut each little stem off, each little rosette, and plant each one, and they would grow fine, or plant it as a whole and have a little larger tree.
Okay. And then, so the next questions are about soil mixture proportion.
Yeah.
What is the ratio of lava sand to pumice to perlite, and so no regular soil?
So if you have a bag of potting soil, you want to add it 50-50 with the lava sand. So you just get the same amount of lava sand. Now they have the Falkirk succulent mix at Falkirk now, so you don't have to use the multi-purpose and mix a bunch of sand into it. But I still cut the Falkirk with quite a bit of lava sand, because it's a pink soil by the time I'm getting it, it's quite pink.
Well, it's hard to see the color in the light.
But that's what you go to. If it's still, looks just totally dark, it doesn't have enough lava sand for me.
And that was in one of the pictures where you have that big pile in front of the house.
Yeah, right. You can see that big pile. So they mixed up, a yard and a half of this, a yard and a half of that, or something. So that, but 50-50 generally is what I do. And when you're planting into the ground, it's the same way. You can add that 50% right to the soil that you're planting, and then that gives you more material. So you would just be mound up by, naturally by then, just with adding that lava sand into the planting hole with the original soil.
Okay. Somebody's asking, which plants can I grow in outdoors here, outdoor gardens here in Marin?
Yeah. So the Chrysulas, the Echeverias, Aeoniums, are all very good genuses here. And then aloes do quite well. However, if you do just a little research, they should give you, projected temperatures. And so like the jade plants actually, get frost damage quite easily here. And where, other ones, euphorbias, can live in the central valley and, get down to 10 degrees or 5 degrees or whatever. So just a little information or research will really tell you the range of the plant. Plus you have all your little microclimates now in your house. And if you have a plant that's just 2 or 3 feet away from the house, it's going to be in a really protected place by the heat and that dynamics, the way it works. So instead of being out in the exposed. So myself is I have to know the plants. So I'll get 3 of the same kind of a new plant I don't know. Leave one totally out in heat and brutal cold in the winter. It gets down to 25 at my place and up to 100 easy different days. And then I'll leave one partially sheltered. And then, you know, I'll leave one in the winter where it's totally in up here, my little shelving unit, safe from rain and getting max sun there. And then I learn what is that plant tolerance. So yeah, so that's why you either you consult with somebody, a book or a person, and usually you can get a quick guide that way too. Yeah, I'm always open for consultations and plants and sales and everything, so don't hesitate to call.
Okay, and then is there a way to tell which succulents will flower?
Well, every plant should flower because they're flowering plants. So it's a matter of usually light then, as each species requires different amounts, but succulents require more light days and hours than the typical plant because of their nature of where they grow up. But even the plant that's growing up in the desert, it might be on the behind a rock on the north facing, so it never gets direct sun, but it's living out there with all that light that's still bombarding it. And so is it sun? What was it again? Remind me so I make sure.
Which succulents will flower?
Okay, so flower. So it's a matter of the light. If it's trying to stretch, it's never going to flower there. So this one I showed you before. You know, the one that's getting the sunlight, oh, here it is flowering, right? Mm-hmm. And the one that's not getting the sunlight is not going to flower. Now, there is a strange exception. If so you could totally get your plant ready to die and then it might flower again. At last gasp effort, some plants will, before they die, they figure I got to flower and go out with a bang, and then they die of exhaustion essentially. So either, you know, the plant's thriving, so it's getting enough light and water and good soil, it'll flower, or in a few cases, it's a last gasp effort. But generally, it's good care and then increasing the light for flowering.
Okay. Is there a good book that you would recommend for beginners?
There are several out there. They're the smaller ones. Shucks, they're inside for the actual. But Deborah Lee Baldwin's books are good. She, yeah, put me in a couple of hers. There's a Succulent Simplified that's she did. So that might be one. And there are other books out there on, you know, beginning stuff, and a lot of stuff on the internet for beginners, or, you know, just basically you've gotten the information today that you need. So now you're going to be intermediate because this is the basics. This should get you going now. And hopefully you won't have to kill as many plants as others do, and you'll be them to thrive and bloom. So get your plants to thrive and enough light and they'll bloom. Yeah.
Someone's asked if when you purchase the succulent from a big box store, do you repot them?
Yes, they're going to have that yucky loose soil, and it's just going to be full of peat moss. And so definitely repot them. Now, sometimes you'll open one up and Euphorbias in particular can have very few roots and yet this kind of a big plant. So sometimes you can feel like, what? Well, you know, they just put these little roots in there. But yeah, that potting mix is just really hard to work with, and it dries up, and then, you know, you're just watering through the outside of the plant a lot. So I would definitely repot them.
Okay. So someone's asking,
excuse me, plus you could pot them then into a decorative pot if you wanted, or into an arrangement with a few. Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is, which succulent yuccas agaves do you do best in full sun next to a driveway that reflects heat like the Sahara?
Yeah, so agaves are notoriously awesome for being really hardy. And I remember I left one out of water and no water or soil for a year and a half and potted it up and it's thriving. So it sat there for a year and a half with nothing and it lived through it. So there's definitely tough agaves out there. Now it's the size you have to worry about because you don't want to plant, agave Americana or even Mediopicta alba. You could have a little cutie thing and then it grows into something with, 4-foot leaves with spikes. So you couldn't even walk by it. Yeah.
Okay, how often should you replenish the soil in a pot of succulents?
Yeah. So generally, 3 to 5 years, it should be lasting, I think. Now they could start to slightly kind of turn yellowish. And so that would be a sign that the nitrogen's running out. And instead of fertilizing, it's just to change the soil is better. And you can even root prune some of them if they've become too large. So the nurseries pump, these with full of water and fertilizers to get them up to market size as quick as they can. That's what their job is. But we're not going to continue that kind of treatment because it often leads to kind of yucky growth and stuff. Oh, here it is. Yeah. So here's an example of a lithops that's been stretching. Now, see how that papery thin? That's a year's growing season. So this has been thriving probably for a couple of years without even living in soil or adding any water. And here it is, living for that many years. So they're incredibly tough if you match, just the right one with the right space. So let me circle back though to make sure I get the question answered.
So it was how often should you replenish the soil in a pot?
Yeah. Now, if you have a giant pot, it might be 10 or 12 years even. And if it's so big like that, that's when you might really choose maybe to fertilize a little bit. Always dilute it and never fertilize a stressed plant. So if it hasn't been watered, it's drought stress, don't give it fertilizer water. Give it some water to bring it back into shape and then give it the dilute fertilizer. Always for succulents, you at least want to cut it into half from the normal recommendations.
Okay, and then you showed a leaf with a baby plant and a root at the same point. At the same point, does the whole thing get planted with the baby being the only part above ground, or do I get rid of the old leaf first?
Yeah, no. The old leaf is going to be the yolk sac. It's going to suck that entire water out of it and leave a little papery thing, and all that water is going to go then into the new little leaves, and they're going to get larger. So that's its yolk sac. That's its survival pack. So if it can't make roots without water, and it can't grow without the roots and leaves. So you'll definitely leave that on. So if you noticed in my slide, you can actually leave them on dirt, your medium that you want them in, and they'll often just root onto there. Sometimes you can prop them up next to the edge of the pot as you go around. Some people stick them, just a third of the way in. Some go a half or 2/3, 3/4 even. Pretty much it seems, they want to work. So you'll just find what works for you with your particular, soil that you're using and stuff, and give it a try, but you can take some out and put them on your windowsill and just watch the process happen. And it's kind of neat to watch the roots grow on some. And then when they're not turning that way and they're getting, look like they're going to rot out, and, throw those away quickly so you don't spread the contamination around. So the roots, that's just, they'll just grow. So make sure, you get the little baby roots in there, or you put them in just after you pick them, and then it's going to grow the roots right in the soil, and you don't have to risk breaking them or anything in the process of the transplanting.
Okay. Are there any succulents that can live indoors in low light conditions?
Yes, Haworthias are good for that. Sansevierias, you've probably seen those in some dry places. You definitely want to cut down on your watering very much for a plant in the shade like that. And then you probably don't even water it from like Thanksgiving through Valentine's Day. You might just kind of missed it if it's, but is it right where a heating duct maybe blows on it? or in the winter, does it get that straight sun at the one time of the day? So, you know, in situations like that, then they would need more water than one that isn't getting that kind of microenvironment. So yeah, Haworthias, some aloes, aloe, oh my goodness, what is in here? I'll see if I can remember. Oh, Eris, Diter, something. It's one of the first ones alphabetically. That one grows very well in shade. The trouble is if they get lanky, then, you know, so fast growing ones are probably not good, that are, you know, gonna, because they'll be trying to grow too fast to find some light.
Okay, and then I have an aloe with a number of baby plants amongst the tightly growing leaves. How do I harvest these baby plants to propagate them?
Yeah, well, let's do it. Let me, so again, for right equipment, you got your gloves, and you got your gloves for aloes, and then you got your gloves for the really hard ones. So let's come over here. Let's see. We brush away the soil. Is that right in the camera there? Now, sometimes there are going, I had an aloe in a 5-gallon pot and about 5, 6 babies. So I was all excited. And I went in and they were not able to really break them off. They were all just, you know, welded on. So sometimes you're going to find that they won't come off. And then if you want to, you know, physically can also break them. But sometimes there's going to be, well, you can see one rosette here. So there's one that can come off, and this one. So let's, so now I have one that got quite a little bit smashed, but here's a nice, healthy rosette now that I can plant on its own after I let this harden off here.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, I think right between these two, I could break it off. Here's a little rotted out one. And looks like right between here. So now I could choose to leave this or make more babies. So there we have another baby. So it's, you know, you use force, you're going to have to break it if you want to do that sometimes. Other times they just fall apart on you and they just come right out. So those are nice ones, you know, you're kind of doing the right thing. Now, in the case of this little one, you would take the little cuttings. So there's little mealybugs. But yeah, isn't that it? So in this case, though, I wouldn't be cutting those. They're too small. I'd let those get larger. Now this one possibly could, you know, those two could make it, but I don't know. This one, they look kind of small for me, but usually that would be a situation where you could harvest those as well. Is that good?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Okay. So the next one is, what do you recommend portions for our 3 soil components, and what are the recommended quantities for the of amendments?
Yeah. So you're, if you just go out into your yard and you have, you know, your soil there, you're going to want to add 50% lava sand to it. And you could do that over the whole garden area or just in planting holes. But you know, the plants are going to send roots out. So it's advisable to do, you know, into the top 6 to 8 inches. Often it's better, instead of trying to dig down to 12 inches and mix the lava sand, just dig down the 4 to 6 and then also incorporate soil and raise and elevate the area. And then the water will drain off and it's more interesting, and you can use your rocks and little nooks and crannies. So, Haworthia is not going to want as much direct sun since it can tolerate the shade as, say, your Chrysula Falcata, that one with the beautiful red flowers in that picture of the Mill Valley garden. So that's, yeah.
Okay.
Answer that. Okay.
So the next one is, which succulents are frost resistant?
So frost resistant. It's surprisingly, each genus can have ones that tolerate frost and that don't. But every tag should have on it usually, good, prevent from frost, or down to 15 degrees, down to 5 degrees, only good to 30 degrees. So which ones are frost on? Well, most agaves and aloes do well with that. And then in the Chrysula family. So echeverias, for instance, are found in the Mexican mountains, 3,000 to 5,000 feet up. So they occasionally get snowed on. And the Aloe polyphylla is on Kilimanjaro up, 7,000, 8,000 feet or something, and it gets snowed on. So it's just a little bit of research on the tag, but unless you want to consult, then the person is, is going to know some. But yeah, it should be in the tag, hopefully. But if not, then you got to use a resource, either a person or a source of some kind.
Okay. So someone's asked about, what do you do? What do brown spots on succulents leaves mean, and what do you do about it?
Yeah, so I got one right here. So I potted up 2 sets of these beautiful Aeonium nobilis, and the 4 out here, the little more exposed, all have the fungus spots from the winter and rain, and the few that were closer to a more protected area and just 20 feet away, 30 feet away, have no spots on them. So in this case, it was a winter, it's a fungus thing happening. If it's in the summer and you suddenly get these spots, it was probably a sun stress, either from a particular heat wave or a plant underwater during heat. Could also get the sun damage. So it's the season will tell you a lot of which one it is. Yeah,
okay.
January to March, it's fungus, most likely.
So someone's asked if you could repeat the alcohol to water ratio for the pest spray.
Just half and half. I have down here, 6, 8 jars of it, and just halfway with alcohol and halfway with water. And it's not, if you get 60, 40, it's no big deal. Sometimes I get mean and I do 61%. I'm going to get those bugs. But
Okay.
it's generally 50-50, but it's a rough measure. Don't sweat it.
Okay. And then how deep do you need to amend before planting? And are succulents short rooted?
Yes, a few have giant tap roots or tubers, as we showed you, but many, sedums have very thin roots, echeverias. So the ones that have larger roots, or some aloes and agaves will have larger roots. So again, the particular question?
It was, how deep do you need to amend before planting?
So yeah, the distance, if you're basically you want the top 18 inches is the most of any plant's roots going. 10 inches for succulents, 6 inches for some are actually going to be fine, where if you have, a larger aloe, it's going to want those 18 inches, or, actually, if you just give it the good start, they're so hardy, they're going to find their way in. But 6 to 8 inches maybe outside, or, 12 would be great, but that's a lot more work. And so it might be good to go down 4 or so inches and then build up 4 or 5 inches with adding more material. But if you don't want to do that and the added expense of that, yeah, just 50-50 in there.
Okay. And then someone asked, can you buy the soil already mixed for the succulents?
Yeah, so the Falkirk succulent mix has it. You'll find succulent mixes at nurseries. If you're just doing a small amount and you don't want a, a big 40-pound bag of lava sand in an apartment or something, sure, you just buy the small amount, or you buy the small bag of pumice or something to mend your potting soil.
Okay, so someone's asked if you could discuss the epiphyliums. Theirs got
Yeah.
too much water and don't look good. And she's wondering if it might be fungus.
So I'm don't really grow many of those. The if it looks like fungus, it's probably a fungus among us. So sulfur would be treating a fungus would be the most common treatment, and cutting out the damaged parts and exposing it to a little more light maybe, or so air movement and pruning are good if you keep the leaves open, but that can help prevent the fungus with the air circulation. So maybe if you send a picture, I could help. But the good chance if it's hard, then it's more a watering issue. If it's soft and yellowy where it dies back, that's more overwatering. And if it's black or mushy, gray, green, brown, gooey, so that's definitely fungus. So you want to cut that out of the plant to try to save it.
Okay. Did you have a favorite succulent for indoors?
Well, yeah, it's what was it? Well, the little Haworthias are so cute in the little windows, and they often will bloom for you and not need the light. The little agaves look kind of cute. Scilla violacea. Scilla is a little ball thing, and it sends up these little upside down purple flowers. It's now maybe called Lepidura too, but it was Scilla socialis or violacea, because then it had the violet under the leaves, and it makes the bulbs for you. And it bloomed in a north-facing window in San Francisco, so it had to be pretty well for the fog and everything, and still it bloomed for me in the window. So I love that one, my first little one. So those are a couple, yeah.
Okay, someone asked, can you plant right away a leaf, or do you need to wait 3 to 4 days?
No, I think, within minutes or something, it's going to be pretty much done. I don't think they wait a long time, certainly not days or anything. You just take them, wait an hour or something, they're going to have a film over it quick. I was amazed. I was pruning a pine tree for a client and had this big 4 or 6 inch wound, and how quickly it sent out the sap and closed it up. And yeah, it was just amazing. They are really adapted for where they live. They can't run away, so plants have amazing adaptations. Yeah, so you don't have to wait long for the leaves. Now if it seems to be a really big leaf or a big scar, or it's a big size, then yeah. But if it's just a little thing like that and you're taking it off, it's going to be quick.
Okay. Someone's planted a succulent in regular soil. Could they still add lava rock and sand and other amendments?
Yeah, transplanted. Their succulents are so easy to transplant. They're so amenable to it. And in fact, when you transplant some of them, you just take them down to pretty much bare roots. So yeah, you definitely, it's much better to then repot it than leave it in that mixture.
So we had someone who's asked if they know that it gets colder in Marin. Should I plant succulents in the ground in Marin? And they live in San Francisco. And do they do better in containers in San Francisco?
Well, I've done both in San Francisco, and containers are a wonderful way to grow the plants. Plus, you can protect them easier if really bad weather is coming. But if it's a large one in a place you're not going to be moving it around or want to, so they're easier to cover too, probably, if you wanted. But in the ground, the plants are going to definitely grow faster and larger than kept in containers. If you keep them in containers, you can keep them actually kind of root bound and kind of bonsai them and keep them small. So you have much more control in the container than once you plant a plant. My friend had 4 little aloes in a 4-inch pot. Well, I didn't know aloe ferox. It was just cute little things that sat there for a couple of years. And finally he said, oh, take these home and plant them. Well, I put them just a foot back from the curb. And within a year or two, they were out into, the scratch zone, cutting people down in the walkway. So it took like 6 hours to dig those 4 up and transplant them. And, now the rosettes are like 4 feet across with, 3-foot trunks. So they would never do that kept in a container. Yeah.
Okay. We've reached an hour and a half, Gary. So I want to make sure you're okay. Or because there's 13 more questions.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one was, do container succulents need to be fertilized in the ground?
No, I used to fertilize some and things, but no, I don't anymore. It's just a waste of time and money. Even orchids, orchids are always blooming pretty nice even without, but that's a case where it really does bump it up. But for succulents, no. If you have just a good soil mix, you're going to be fine in containers for years. And, only maybe if it's a large container and it's just too much for you to do and the plants are looking a little yellowish, that's when you can add the dilute stuff. But otherwise, I don't use the root hormone for rooting them. They're going to root or not, they just root. And as we, can see for most of these. So, but if you do fertilize, don't fertilize a stressed plant, and don't fertilize it when it's going into its dormant period. So only early in the growing season, and then, maybe one more, but then definitely cut it back before you would ever going into the dormant period.
Okay. And then someone's asked, if succulents are outside, how do you control ants? Does the water alcohol mix work or something else?
Yeah, ants are boric acid. Everybody says the boric acid. So getting the ants to take that back to their nest is kind of the hard part. But that's what everything does with ants. And the ants bring in the mealies and the aphids, and actually can herd them and milk them for honeydew and protect them when the ladybug or the soldier beetle comes up to eat them. So the ants will run in and start biting all the legs and shoo off the predator. And then they milk those animals and for food. So they herd them just like we herd cows. It's pretty amazing.
Someone's asked, should they add soil amendments to cactus soil or buy regular potting soil and other amendments to do that?
I really that'll often be perlite in those mixes. The lava sand is so awesome for the sizes. But if you get the pumice, that could be added to. But if you're just doing a small amount, then you probably do just want to buy that mixture. But the lava sand is, just liquid gold or mineral gold for succulents, it seems, and the pumice, but that's usually more uniform in size, so I don't find it quite as useful as the lava sand with all those different sizes.
Okay. What do you do with white powder or succulent leaves, and what causes it?
So some succulents get the natural kind of coating and powder, especially a couple of dahlias, but I think you're probably talking about powdery mildew that would show up on the plants as kind of a white powder or film. So that's generally a fungus problem, a mildew. So it's excess water and cool. So can you increase the sun, or can you prune a little bit of a tree so that it gets more sun, so that can, it wants those cool, damp, and kind of darker areas. So is it the bottom leaves only, or more the top leaves? And then a sulfur, again, is probably the only really useful treatment for fungus, but make sure you're not around waterways or any creeks or anything where that can get into. I think it's quite bad for aquatic life, the sulfur. But that would be a treatment. But mostly it's a cultural thing to get more air circulation. You could prune, get some more wind through, and air or sunlight will hopefully take care of that.
Okay, and so is what's the best way to plant succulents in containers without holes, such as a windowsill planter?
Yes, so the best thing to do is to drill a hole. But if you can't, it's a rental property, then you can do it a couple ways. One is just to make sure you have a lot of lava sand and a lot of, and then underwater. Or you could plant in containers, and then hopefully you can plant those and then take them out to water, or be able to water the plants more individually like that. But if you can't get any kind of drainage like that, just you make sure you have to underwater.
Okay. Is there a best time to plant succulents outside?
Generally, the spring and the fall are best if you get it in the spring. But in Mill Valley, I put gardens in July and August, and they do just fine. And even November and December. And but you don't want to plant them when the soil is really saturated. You don't want to be out there, you know, where you walk and you destroy the structure, actually, if you work a soil when it's too wet. So that would only be you know, when it's too wet, or it's too hot for you in the sunshine. But evening, you know, or mornings, you know, it's so but if it's kind of foggy out, you can really plant pretty much any time of the year now. But generally it's the spring, and then it gets time to get ready for the winter. And if you do it in the fall, then, you know, it's got to get the winter ready quicker, where the springtime, it has to get through the heat first. So, but, you know, if you don't want to plant, you know, a delicate thing when there's a heat wave coming and, you know, for the next week, you know, just wait and plant the plant afterwards. You know, you want to give it a good start as you can. So avoid extremes, either too hot or too cold.
Okay, so someone said that they've noticed this 3-stump tree outside your door. Is it a succulent, and what is the name of it? I guess the one behind you that's out right straight back behind.
Yeah, that's Aloe Bainzii. That's one of the aloe trees. Hi, Dad. Yeah, so that I've seen them 20, 30 feet in Oakland, and I've seen them, you know, 50 feet down in Southern California at the Huntington Botanical Gardens. I think they're just crazy large. Yeah, so I have some tree aloes and large specimens. Yeah, the Mill Valley has a Aloe Bainzii too, so you can go by and see that one as it grows up.
Okay, and then can you wait too long before planting a cutting?
Yes. Yeah, you definitely can. In fact, that Senatio Chrysismis, a week is way too long. You just want to get that in the soil the next day. And some aloes, I've waited 6 months and still put them in. You know, they still make it sometimes, but yeah, I can take some cuttings and forget about them sometimes, and I come back and they're all dried up, and, you know. So if it's, you know, at that point, it's green can them pretty much, and unless it's a really rare one, you know, it's just move on, take some new cuttings, or yeah. So definitely you can wait too long for sure.
Okay, so that's it, Gary. Thank you again for joining us today, and thank you for showing us your garden, and thanks to Beth too for helping out, getting you all set up. So for all of you, I'll go sending out a follow-up email. Thank you for sticking around. This did go a little longer than it should have been, but we'll be sending out a follow-up email with like a survey from the Master Gardeners, as well as contact for Gary. And again, thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next time. Join us next week. We'll be with UC Master Gardener Bob Maselli. We'll be talking about fire smart planting. So again, thank you all. And again, thank you, Gary, for being here with us. We can't wait till we're back in person again next year, and we'll have you back in the library like normal. So you guys have a great weekend. Thank you.
Hope you learned something. Bye-bye.
Bye.